what to expect. I mean, there's all this like attention around what to expect when you're expecting, but what to expect when baby's here.
I'm Heather Grish, and this is the Wisdom of the Body podcast. This podcast explores the idea of body intelligence as the real key to learning the knowledge of life, or what we call Ayurveda in the ancient language of Sanskrit. We do that by connecting with today's creative leaders and experts who will help you listen to your body, trust your gut, and live in deeper harmony with nature. Come join me as we unlock the golden door to clear, direct perception and become very deep listeners. You can find the Wisdom of the Body podcast on Apple, Spotify, and Stitcher. You can also follow us by joining my email at heathergrish.com or on Instagram at heathergrish. I know you're going to love this podcast, so take a second right now to subscribe. Today, we're going to talk about some real life stuff that happens to newly birthing women. And if you haven't had kids before, it's always a bit of a shock to hear certain things about what happens after you have kids. I remember hearing stories about what women went through during the postpartum period before I had kids. And I actually remember thinking, I'm tough. I'm not going to go through that. But then once I got pregnant, I started thinking, oh gosh, I need to line up help for myself when the baby's here. You know, the postpartum period is amazing, but it's really also no joke. I feel like there's a curtain. On one side of it, you have no idea what it feels like to be a birthing mother. Even if you get a peek over the curtain, perhaps from a conversation like I have with my guest today, but you really can't understand it because you actually can't walk over to the other side of that curtain. But this stuff is super helpful to hear if you're thinking about having a child, or if you have anybody in your life who is having a child or who's recently had a child and might need support, because it really, 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 really does take a village to raise a child. You're listening to the Wisdom of the Body. Today, I'm here with Jenna Furnari, who's a Santa Monica-based certified Ayurvedic practitioner specializing in postnatal care for supporting women through mind, body, and spirit after giving birth. She is the co-founder of Ayurvedic Mamas, a membership site that provides whole body healing for women and has trained Ayurvedic postpartum doulas from more than 15 different countries. Following her own complete recovery of postpartum depression and anxiety, she is committed to sharing guidance and resources with mothers struggling with postpartum mood disorders through the holistic lens of Ayurveda. Thanks for joining us today, Jenna.
Hi, Heather. Thank you for having me.
God, it's so hard to believe it's been so many years since we studied together at Mount Madonna, and our kids are 4 years old now, right? Vincent's 4?
Yeah, he just turned 4. I know. It's crazy. It's been a whirlwind.
Oh my gosh. And you even have a second child, so your life is a lot more chaotic than mine is.
Yeah. I mean, believe it or not, it's like by the time the second child comes into the picture, it's like, all right, I've got this figured out to an extent at least.
Yeah, that you've already had some mastery with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Part of me just wants to reminisce about Ayurveda school with you for 45 minutes because it was such a lovely experience, wasn't it?
It was. I want to go back there.
Jenna and I were in Ayurveda school together for a few years. We were living part-time, essentially in a retreat center in the Santa Cruz Mountains in Northern California, which is where our Ayurveda school was. And for me, it was pretty amazing because it was like getting to leave my high-paced sort of concrete life in San Francisco, getting to hang out in the woods with turkey and deer and a bunch of my hippie friends and those who weren't people who weren't hippies, but who secretly wanted to be hippies. It was pretty magical.
It was.
Yeah. I really miss the pancakes there.
And the kitchari. Oh.
Yeah.
So good.
But we learned a lot. And coincidentally, Jenna and I, after graduation, both had children in the year following that. And I know that because it was on our minds a lot when we were both in school, this idea of building a family, especially for me. I know it was for you too, because you even did your master's thesis on preconception care.
Yeah.
And so it was on our minds a lot when we were in school. And obviously for me, that led to the birth of my book, The Ayurvedic Guide to Fertility. And it led to the birth of your business, helping women in the postpartum period of life. And I know you've had a pretty interesting journey in the postpartum period that I want to hear whatever you want to share about that, you know, from your personal story today. And I'd love to hear first, though, because Ayurveda is not necessarily super mainstream right now. I mean, it is from like a self-care perspective, right? Everybody knows about golden milk and tongue scraping and, certain Ayurvedic practices that have sort of made it into the mainstream and things that people can do for self-care at home. And, everybody comes to this journey as a practitioner, also different places. Like I had Jay Rajan Kodakanath on episode 30, and his grandfather was an Ayurvedic doctor or a Vaidya. And, Dr. Duyard, he was on episode 12. He seems to have been sort of guided onto the path of Ayurveda by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. Susan Weiss Bolin found it later in life. For you, you're American, you grew up in the US like me. Was Ayurveda something that was part of your family? How did you really hear of it, and why did you gravitate towards it?
Yeah. I mean, the answer to that is pretty simple. My path to Ayurveda happened well, in my undergrad years, I found yoga. Actually, I'll date myself back even further than that. I found yoga when I was a teenager, but I really committed seriously and dove deeply into the practice of yoga through my undergrad years in college, and then went through the whole process of many people I know have experienced of completing your undergrad and that big question of what's next. So I dabbled in different jobs and just really worked to figure out what my big move was going to be towards my future, towards establishing a career. I lived in Pacific Grove, California at the time, which isn't far from Mount Madonna, where we met each other. And I remember it was 2011, and just browsing kind of somewhat aimlessly on Google and came across this Ayurveda program up at Mount Madonna. And at that point, I understood Ayurveda. It had been, part of my yoga practice. I had been teaching yoga at that point for a number of years. So Ayurveda was familiar enough on a very surface level. And this idea of retreating, as you mentioned, up to Mount Madonna, which was about an hour away into these beautiful mountains, and studying this really unique form of holistic medicine. And at that point, I was like, that was where it all kind of began. I ended up there and loved it and went further and further and further. So went on to complete the certified practitioner course. And then after that, completed the Master of Arts course. And 4 years had gone by at that point. And when I completed the Master of Arts course and was practicing as an Ayurvedic practitioner, I was doing so really at kind of just a very generalized point, in the way that I was sharing the practice with others. I had a pretty strong, significant, successful business of teaching yoga in Monterey and Carmel. And my clients were naturally drawn to me to learn about Ayurveda, just being that Ayurveda complements yoga so beautifully. And so people would come to me with more lifestyle concerns, around sleep and weight loss and seasonal eating and cleansing, and just topics that they were curious about and topics that I loved sharing with them. But yet a couple of years had gone by and I did still feel where is this going? I know that it wants to be more than just a generalized approach to the practice. I felt like I wanted to focus in on something. So fast forward a couple of years, I moved down to where I'm based now, Santa Monica, and had my son. And at that point, I had supported a few clients in my practice of sharing Ayurveda. I had supported my clients as their postpartum doula, really without even being aware that that's what I was doing. I didn't call myself a doula, but I came in and was present in their lives and literally present in their homes, cooking them Ayurvedic foods, supporting them through mind-body practices just to achieve and maintain the sense of groundedness and well-being through those trials of the very early phases of motherhood. And then I landed in Los Angeles, gave birth to my son, and realized, wow, this piece of care, this Ayurvedic postpartum window of when from the heart support can come from a Ayurvedic specialist or an Ayurvedic practitioner is so, so very critical. I needed it from what I went through personally after the birth of my son, just feeling this extreme sense of aloneness, isolation, the mental struggles that I went through of, pretty heightened anxiety and moments of pretty deep, dark depression. And of course, I didn't become super clear of what it was that I was experiencing until I started to move out the other end of it. And at that point, I made the commitment of, okay, I've landed here in Los Angeles. It's time to reestablish myself and rebuild my business again from the ground up. And I'm letting go of everything else. And even when people came to me and inquired as to just a more generalized treatment using Ayurveda, I referred them to other practitioners that were nearby that I knew of. And I started seeing women really specifically and strictly through the lens of caring for beings after they've given birth. So through those first weeks and first months postpartum. And that was a few years back. And that was where just really a whole new form of what I was doing and what was important to me and the way that my kind of career manifested in the shape that it's taken. So that's a little look at how I've ended up where I am today. And it's really cool just to see the effects that it's had, not only the women that I've cared for, either in person or virtually, but also in the way that this form of care helped me through, again, that pretty intense period of postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety that I had after my firstborn was arrived 4 years ago. And then my daughter was born a year ago in like some weeks. Her birthday was just recently. And comparing those two very different instances and experiences and circumstances that I went through following each of their birth was pretty drastically different. And I really strongly think that or hold the practice of Ayurveda for being the significant reason for really just the improvement, the whole mental, emotional improvement and wellness that I went through my postpartum period after her birth in comparison to the postpartum period that I had, postpartum experience that I had after my son was born. So anyways.
That's great. And I've been specializing too. And I think it's good because it's, really providing a service to a certain type of person who needs something. And in this case, to women who need support in the postpartum period, which I can't say that there's any woman who does not need support in the postpartum period.
Absolutely. Yes.
Right. But it can get deeper and darker at certain times. And I want to hear more about what you've seen since you've been specializing in that area. And I'd love to hear a little bit about what you've learned is maybe also the difference between the Ayurvedic approach to treating postpartum. I know you wanted to talk about mood disorders, but also in general, that postpartum period, how does that differ from how sort of the mainstream medical field treats that category? Yeah.
Yeah. I have been thinking a lot about this recently. And the main thing that I'm seeing currently is that, so the body goes through, as we all know, the body goes through huge, significant change through the 40 weeks, more or less, of pregnancy. And when thinking of it from an Ayurvedic perspective, the Ayurvedic treatment in this case is really aimed at cultivating a sense of, steadiness and groundedness through daily practices and foods that she eats in order to complement that significant change that's happening in her body. So what our mainstream society doesn't spend a whole lot of time looking at and considering and talking about is the really quick change that our bodies, as mothers, that our bodies go through the birthing journey. So giving birth is beautiful. Welcoming a baby into your life is beautiful. Those immediate days and then weeks and then months following the birth, our bodies continue to go through some pretty phenomenal change, both on a physiological level, emotionally, hormonally, in terms of just like, again, going back to lifestyle and the habits and routines that we've known for 30 or 40 plus years, however long we've been alive. Suddenly sleep is different. Suddenly the needs and the demands on ourselves are so drastically different. And, the care that we get from an allopathic viewpoint is we go in for a follow-up, in the first week, more often than not, we go in for our initial follow-up. And then we go to visit our OB once more at 6 weeks. So what's happening in those 5 weeks in between? And in that 6-week appointment, our OB has patients stacked before your arrival and patients stacked just following your arrival. So you might be with your OB for 10 minutes, 20 minutes if you're lucky. That's been my experience, at least, and the experience of many women that I've supported. And so I think that where Ayurveda differs so greatly is that the work of, if it's an Ayurvedic doula, if it's an Ayurvedic counselor, if it's an Ayurvedic practitioner or an Ayurvedic doctor, whoever it is that you source for the support that is needed following birth, it's more than just let me check in with you once a week or once every couple of weeks. It's every day. It's having conversations. It's really opening and holding trusted space between yourself as a practitioner and this client, the woman who once more is going through pretty significant body transformation following the birth of her child. And what comes from that gap that is needing to be filled by the mass amount of women that are going through the postnatal period without support, leads to further symptoms. And a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times, those symptoms can manifest with mental illness or just mental disturbance manifestations. And whether it's insomnia or the baby blues or, like going even further down the spectrum, like, more extreme levels of anxiety or depression. And then not only that, not only having the experience of those symptoms, but doing so from this state of perhaps feeling pretty alone. So again, like there's so much hype and attention given to women during the phase of pregnancy. And then suddenly she gives birth and she's usually surrounded by, support coming from her family, her friends, her partner, at least through the first week or the first couple of weeks. But then it drops away. And the postpartum period is not over at a couple of weeks. Her need continues and it goes on. So by not having the resource of just someone trusted to turn to or someone trusted to ask the simple question of, this is what I'm experiencing. What could this be? Is this postpartum depression? Is this postpartum anxiety? Is this the baby blues? Like, help me kind of talk through and navigate all that I'm seeing and feeling and experiencing and hearing internally. So she internalizes quite a bit. And it's such a blessing for any woman to be able to turn to someone trusted throughout that phase. And the work of that is what's most important to me, not only offering it myself to women, but having these conversations with other women, other doulas, birth workers, and others that are in this field around ways that we can make this connection to, newly birthing mothers, making it more possible and more widely available.
Wow, Jenna, it's interesting because I know that a lot of the listeners probably haven't had a baby yet, and some have and some haven't. And I did not know before I had a child, like just how intense that postpartum period was going to be.
Right.
I really was totally, totally, totally clueless about it. I mean, I had heard things, but, it's kind of like people can tell you things, but you also really don't know until you go through it yourself. And I think some of what I've heard you say so far in this is how big the support piece is for women. And it's a little tricky for women. Our health is so intertwined with the network of individuals that we have around us supporting us. It's absolutely insane and very difficult to explain, which is why it's pretty troubling that when a woman has a child, she's not guaranteed to have something like paid maternity leave.
Right.
Apparently, there's some companies offer that, and there is the Family Medical Leave Act, which covers a small percentage of the workers in the United States where we both live, but it's not covering a lot of people. And it also wouldn't cover people who are self-employed or have their own business. So a lot of people are left out in the cold when it comes to like financial support. They'll just even start with financial support as one way of being supported, because companies like Amazon apparently offers 20 weeks for new moms and 6 weeks for new dads. And there are some companies that are trying to do better, but we know that money equals the ability to pay for support. We could pay for a nanny or a babysitter. We could pay for a night nurse, a cleaning person, a postpartum doula, someone to help cook us dinner, fold the clothes, give the baby attention while we have to work on a project, or stay at home with the baby if we have to go to a doctor's appointment. There's so many things that you don't realize you need help for with a child as well. With money, mom and dad can get some exercise. Mom and dad can take some time for self-care, meet a friend for a cup of tea, or spend some time together to keep their own relationship healthy. So it feels like there's this double whammy of no financial support from employers or the government. And simultaneously, so many people in our generation don't even live near their families anymore. So there's so many women. It's like this double whammy, it seems, culturally, that's going on. There's so many women lacking support. But here's the thing that I also see, and let me know if you agree with this, Jenna. Even women with lots of money and support also seem to get seriously affected by this postpartum period. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I do agree with that. Yes.
And part of that's just because of what happens naturally to our bodies when we go through the postpartum period. And if we don't know what's going to happen, then how do we know how to care for ourselves? Could you tell me, I know you mentioned the difficulties and that I experienced as well, a difficulty in the postpartum period, and you shared your personal stories. And I know there's even more to it. We didn't even talk about like suicidal ideation, which happens for some people. And like you said, there's this thing that happens after the first couple weeks when everybody comes to visit. And then suddenly the support drops off because everybody goes home, back into their, she's had the baby. They're okay. I saw the baby. The baby's okay.
Exactly.
I gave my present.
Yeah. Yeah.
I bought them the thing from Babies R Us. I brought them like dinner one night, the things that we do to help each other. But a lot of it, like, what is your partner doing for work? Is your partner home with you? There's so many things. I'll just share, like, for me, the darkest time was 6 months postpartum.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at my fingernails one day and I was like, oh my God, my nails, which are normally very thick and very strong, they were like brittle. And I could see that they were thinner than usual. And I was like, oh my God, look how much I'm wasting away breastfeeding this child. And my partner was working and traveling a lot for work. And I literally, one night on the couch, I thought he was traveling. And I heard a voice pop into my head go, Heather, you wouldn't hurt yourself, would you? And I was like, wow. Oh my God, this is real, real stuff. So, I mean, obviously I cried out for help in that very moment. But when the body's going through these changes, it does affect the mind, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, you hit the nail on the head when you opened with women just not being aware of the support and the resources that are available and what to expect. There's all this like attention around what to expect when you're expecting, but what to expect when baby's here, like those and really important conversations, and also the resources that, if she might not be able to afford a full-time doula, she might not be able to afford a nanny or, the regular childcare to come into her home. But what I have seen, and thanks to the pandemic, like, I can't believe I'm saying that, but what I have seen is, a large number of support groups and women's support circles that have become available for new mothers. So even if it is just a virtual check-in, even if it is just like signing on to Zoom every couple of days or once a week, but having a wider circle of other mothers that you can share your experiences with, ask the questions and like give voice to that like tiny, dark voice that is really wanting to be buried and wanting to be suppressed, but opening up with it. And whether it's, journaling is an incredible exercise, meditation is an incredible exercise, but actually having others to speak to is powerful.
If you want to create a more receptive body, free from toxins, inflammation, and metabolic issues, would it be crazy for you to explore booking an Ayurvedic consultation with me? There's probably never been a more perfect time to do it. Every day you wait matters when it comes to your health. So if you're ready to get your body back in balance, I'll give you a 30-day plan to get you started. Go to heathergrish.com to book a consultation. That's Heather, GRZYCH.com. So Jenna, with all these changes that happen in the body, they can really affect the mind. What are some of the ways that women and their families can work to prevent serious postpartum mood disorders?
Yeah. So believe it or not, one of the greatest tools that I have seen with the women that I work with for supporting all of the emotions and just mentally what's taking place for yourself is communication. So of course the Ayurvedic tools are incredibly, incredibly important and helpful. And you can go into eating the right foods and using the right tricks to get the right amount of sleep and warm oil massage. All of those things are so incredibly important and helpful. But today, what's feeling like is number one, and this might be in thanks to what we're going through with the pandemic and just the isolation to the next level, is communication. So communication for a new mother is already limited. People, of course, hopefully check in on her, whether it's her partner or her own family, her parents, her siblings, like her best friends. Hopefully they're checking in on her. But a lot of times those people don't know the right questions to ask. Sending someone a text message and just saying thinking of you today is a lot different than speaking to someone that you can actually relate to on a deep level. So what I love that I've seen a lot of in the last year, again, and thanks to the pandemic, is so many women's new mothers support circles opening up virtually. And so what that is the opportunity to have some FaceTime with like-minded people, just being other mothers that are also going through the same similar experiences to what you're having. They might be local, they might be in your area, they might be in another state or another country even. But signing on through Zoom or whatever the platform is once or twice a week throughout the months or even up to the entire first year postpartum is so just such a critical paramount in really giving women kind of the boost and the support that they need to hear others speak of their experiences, to have a space open where you can ask this perhaps scary questions or give voice to those dark feelings that that are so easy to want to suppress and tuck away and hide away. And no matter what a woman is going through in terms of the emotions that come up for her in the postpartum period, a really common tendency is to want to bury them and want to just the need to kind of distract oneself from feeling those feelings. But what almost always happens is there's a way that they're going to sneak back up and they're going to sneak back in, which is what leads our body to go through the imbalances that show up. And it might be sleep disturbance. It might be a huge shift in your appetite. It might be extreme weight loss or extreme quick weight gain, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The list goes on. There's so many different symptoms and ways that these feelings can show up and manifest in one's body when they're not looked at and spent time with immediately and directly. And so some of the do-it-yourself tools that are helpful are practices of meditation or simply sitting in a quiet, sacred space in your own home and giving yourself 5 to 10 minutes where you can just sit and journal, have this journal that no one else is going to look at, no one else is going to read, but it's a safe place to set your feelings and emotions down. Or again, have these circles, this wider network of trusted friends, women, trusted other women that are going through the very early phases of motherhood that can kind of be there to hold your hand. You're there for them. And it's an incredible offering and practice that's becoming more and more available, again, through like various platforms. But I've seen that as being really helpful, especially for the women that might not be able to afford to hire a full-time doula that can be there with them for 6 to 8 weeks, or they can't afford to hire a full-time nanny that can be there to help them with their child when they need a long 20 minutes to have a hot, steamy shower or a hot, steamy bath, and just not have to be on a timer of like, okay, my baby's going to be sleeping for however long, 35 more minutes. And what are the things that I can fit into those 35 minutes? But instead, more time carved out to really apply the self-care and nourishment that your body is needing. So speaking and communicating with other women that are also experiencing that, it goes far as like holding the space and hearing one another, and having kind of the platform to give voice to what you're going through also is a really amazing way to learn and discover what is taking place beneath the surface. Like again, as a new mother, like you don't have time to really sit with your feelings. It's like you're kind of on the clock. It's like, what does my baby need? Especially if they're going through really common conditions such as like colic or whatever it may be, like the challenges of breastfeeding or et cetera, et cetera. It's again nice to have like a scheduled in hour at some point in your day or a couple times throughout the week that the time is yours, and the others that are there holding space within that circle also invite you and encourage you and welcome you to say and share the things that you otherwise may not have.
Wow. Listening to you speak, I realized I did have a doula. It was my partner's mom. I mean, I would
Awesome.
literally go and stay with her, and she's in her 80s, and miraculously she's still like just does, functions so well, and she was able to help me so much. But, not
Beautiful.
everybody has a family member around to
Yep.
help them, and it's so important that people consider this when they're preparing to have their child.
Yeah.
So Jenna, and I know that, I had a old client's mom reach out to me who's pregnant and wanted to get trained, to be a postpartum doula because she wanted to learn how, from the Ayurvedic lens, like how she could do a good job taking care of her daughter. Because I do feel like there's this kind of mother's wisdom or grandmother's wisdom. There's this very female element that has somehow gotten lost in our society in the last couple decades. That also feels a little bit like what we're trying to restore through this work. Do you feel that way?
Oh, totally. Totally. And I was actually just thinking of this, like this conversation that you and I are having and this wider work of, educating others on the postpartum, postnatal period. I hope it lands for more than just the expectant mothers. I hope that it lands for like women at wide who may hear this conversation and say like, oh, that may be how I can support my daughter-in-law, or that may be how I can support my sister. Because while it's important for a new mother to use her voice and ask for the help that she needs, it's also powerful for others in your life to come in and say like, hey, Jenna, or hey, Heather, can I make you dinner tonight? Or where can I order dinner to have it delivered? Or do you have 20 minutes that I would love to check in with you today. Do you have 20 minutes that you can chat? Again, those are different and just feel a lot different than someone sending you a text message and saying, how are you doing today? So yes, hopefully this is a dialogue that, lands for like just the wider atmosphere, and around the needs that are so critical for not only the women that are going through birth, but also for the future generations. Like our children are seeing us and they're seeing this. And I think it's a great way to just demonstrate like, the critical care and the important support that we need to give to one another, right?
Yeah, I love that you're talking about what the support system and the network can do to help the mother, because even if a mother has identified that she needs help, we all know that it's not easy to ask for help sometimes.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
Right. And we're all taught like, oh no, you've got to put your big girl pants on and you wanted this baby, you better take care of this baby. There's that whole
Yeah.
tape thing that goes on. But really, it's sometimes very difficult for people to ask for help. And I love that you're making it a little bit more tangible. Like it's not just about calling somebody and saying, how are you doing? It's like, can I do this for you? Or,
Yeah.
and also just asking a question like, how can I support you?
Yeah.
Because maybe she does know what she needs. I don't know. Some cases she probably will know. And in other cases, suggesting is probably super helpful. But on the mom side, Jenna, I guess on the self-care side, because we know that it's so intense, that period in the postpartum. I hope I'm not scaring anybody to not have children, because I really do think that, and it does pass, right? But, we do need to be aware that this is a challenging period. And I don't care how healthy you are, how much meditation. I meditated every day for 6 years before I got pregnant,
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't care how healthy you think you are, how well balanced you think you are, things are different in the postpartum period. So, on the self care side, you mentioned a couple of the Ayurvedic practices earlier.
Yeah.
What are, like, if there's a laundry list of them that you think are good for people to know about?
Yes. All right. So, something that I did a lot of after my son was born, again, 4 years ago, he would go to bed and I would binge on like Game of Thrones or, whatever the hot show is at the time. Or even just like spend time in some other way, like connecting with my husband, my partner, which is certainly important to like carve that time and space out in each day. But like it goes back to truly, truly getting the rest for the balance when it's available. So like postpone your binging sessions on whatever is available on Netflix. All of that can be placed on hold, and that's simple and it's been said a million times, but coming from someone that really sorted through the realities of postpartum depression and anxiety, I look back now and I'm like, gosh, anyways, I wish I would have slept more when I could. Sleep is so, so, so important. Ayurvedically, one of the wonderful, beautiful therapies that helped me significantly and each of my clients love so much is warm oil massage. So if you live somewhere, San Francisco or Los Angeles, where Ayurvedic practitioners and doula are widely available at your fingertips, you might be able to reach out to a postpartum doula and see if someone can come into your home for a single treatment of, it's called abhyanga, or just refer to it as warm oil massage. If you can't find someone or you don't have the ability to reach out to someone to come into your home to give you that treatment, something that you can easily do for yourself. So I like to have a hot shower, spend no more than 10 minutes in there, keep the door closed so my bathroom gets nice and steamy. And then while I'm in the shower, I have my bottle of sesame oil. There's lots of fancy, amazing oils out there available, but you can always just like come back to and rely on just pure sesame oil, which is Ayurvedic sesame oil, not cooking sesame oil because that smells pretty pungently. But sesame oil, which is great for balancing Vata dosha, which is the dosha that gets largely out of whack and out of balance in the postpartum period. Leave it I fill my sink with hot water and then I just drop my bottle of sesame oil in the sink so that it has 10 minutes to heat up. I get out of the shower and I sit down on the floor on my towel and I slowly massage the warm sesame oil into my body, starting at the feet, working my way up to my heart, and then coming back out to my fingertips. And again, working my way across my arms and back to my heart and reaching all parts of the body, like the scalp, the face, my back as best I can, my hips, really spending some extra time in the areas of the hips, the low back, the whole pelvic region, the shoulders, because your chances are you're holding tension in new places that comes from holding your baby and just holding your weight differently in your body. So warm oil massage is powerful. I recommend doing that every day if possible, and at least a couple times a week. And then also when it comes to food, eating foods that are warming, there's a lot of moisture, and it's easy to digest. It's easy for your body to break down. There's a lot of healing taking place. So a lot of energy that's being kind of pushed outwards by the body physically. So just helping yourself out, easy to digest foods in such as like stewy warm oatmeal or kitchari, which is a really common, popular Ayurvedic dish, rice congee, even like bone broths and warm teas, and nourishing yourself with that for at least the first few weeks after birth and possibly even longer, really limiting the other things, limiting like the raw foods and the spicy foods and the heavy foods, and just being super, super gentle and kind to yourself, of course.
Yeah. So if anybody's looking for something to bring a new mother for dinner, bring soup. Bring soup.
Soup.
Or something
Yes.
cooked, something soup, something
Yeah.
warm, something warm. Don't bring her a salad. Don't bring her wine, even though you see all those t-shirts that say mommy wants wine. Bring her something warm and nourishing and loving. Yeah. This is great. And a lot of the suggestions that you gave, I feel like a lot of other people need those as well, more than just a postpartum. But it's about Vata, right? So it's absolutely insane the changes that a woman's body can go through in the process. It's like we're shapeshifters. It's absolutely amazing. And with great change comes sometimes some difficulty in adjusting to those changes. So it is this, like, we all need to understand that you're in a different season right now. You've got to treat the body differently in that season. So I thank you so much for sharing those suggestions for people to be able to do at home, especially if they don't have access to someone like you that could support them on a one-on-one basis. There's so much that we can do when we have the time. And I know time is a luxury for a lot of mothers, especially once there's a second one that's come as well. So, Jenna, one of the things I love to do, because the name of the podcast is The Wisdom of the Body, I love to hear from my guests what that means to them. What does the wisdom of the body mean to you?
I love that because, on this topic, Ayurveda looks at the postpartum period as it's phrased in the ancient Sanskrit Ayurvedic texts as the first 42 days. And I think that, as we've discussed in the last nearly hour, is the great transformation, the many changes that the body goes through throughout the first 42 days. And I think that when you look at the wisdom of the body, it's the ability to really drop in and tune into yourself and hear your body's needs, like making space for all that's coming up, the questions, the unknowns, whatever it may be, the sleep, like the sensory inputs. And more often than not, a new mother in her first 42 days is needing quiet, stimulus-free space like she's never needed before. I remember after my daughter was born, again, this was my second child, after she was born and I was feeling great and she was about 1 week old, and my brother and my sister-in-law came over and my mother-in-law was there and my almost 4-year-old son and my 2 nieces. Like, it was a really full house. And everyone was talking and everyone was excited. And Sienna, my daughter, was just like, her adorable 1-week-old self. And I had this moment of like panic. It was this moment of like, I need to go in my room and close the door and I need quiet isolation. So the wisdom of the body is hearing those needs, is making space for those needs. It's the conversation that I had after everyone left with my partner and said, let's not do that again for a while. It didn't work. It's going to, or it leads to the depletion that I'm, wanting to essentially limit at this point after returning home from giving birth, et cetera, et cetera. So we get back into the importance of communication with those that are there with you in your life and in your home. But I think what comes first is just making sure that you have the ability to close your eyes, like listen to what's going on within, listen to what's wanting to come up, what you're feeling, what, on a physical, on an energetic level, and according to your most basic needs as a human being, which is oftentimes just quiet, stimulus-free rest.
Oh, that sounds so lovely. Jenna, thank you so much for being here with us today. I really enjoyed speaking with you.
Thank you, Heather, for having me.
Thank you for tuning in and dropping in with us today. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. I really want to hear your feedback. To learn more about my work, visit heathergrish.com. That's Heather, GRZYCH.com. And meet me here next time on The Wisdom of the Body.